Hello watchers! Some time ago, I ended up attending a comedy event within my region, and I decided that I want to take an audio recorder with me, in this case my Olympus LS-14. And shortly before starting recording the event, I decided that I want to have a simultaneous recording on my Apple Watch as well. And just out of curiosity, after recording the event, I decided that I want to give it a try and see if I can somehow combine those two recordings to actually create one recording that basically contains the best part out of both of them. And I gave this a try, and I ended up with a pretty interesting result, and I want to demonstrate what I did, how I did it, and what the end result sounds like. But first, if you like what I'm doing, enjoy my content, or want to support my channel, then feel free to subscribe and leave a comment down in the comment section below this video. Now, let's dive right in. Okay, so I'm sitting in front of the project right now, and I basically started with both recordings. I've got a track which is called Apple Watch, and I've got a track which is called Olympus, and both of those have the individual recordings on them. They are already pre-cut and properly aligned, which was the first thing that I had to do. I had to figure out how to align those tracks so they are playing simultaneously. Let's listen into the Apple Watch recording first. Let's solo this and give it a quick play. You can hear that's already kinda great in automatic leveling. Like it's not clipping and everything. Let's now solo the Olympus and you will see what I mean. Let's, for demonstration purposes, disable the declipping plugin that I will explain later. And now let's listen to this. There we go. So that's the Olympus. As you might have noticed, the Apple Watch is obviously a mono recording, right? The Olympus is definitely a stereo recording, and it makes a huge difference. The Apple Watch recording alone doesn't sound too great, especially if you have those parts where the comedian is actually talking and you want to understand her. The Apple Watch does a great job, but it doesn't feel as immersive as the Olympus one. And I wanted to have a recording that's not just understandable, but also nice to listen to. And that's why I decided to add the Olympus below the Apple Watch recording, basically. So the first thing, while lining them both up properly, was that I noticed that when I lined them up properly in the beginning, like jumping 2 hours ahead because the event is kind of long, I noticed that they go out of sync again. So that was pretty weird. And I found that one of the items, the Apple Watch item, was recording at a slower pace than the Olympus one. I don't know how this actually can happen. It might actually happen not while recording, but while saving or something like that. Maybe related to how fast the processor of the recording device, like the Olympus, processes the incoming signal and writes it down. I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but I had to properly configure the playback speed to a 1.00062 instead of the usual 1.0, basically. And so it has to go a little bit faster than just the basic playback speed, so that it can basically hold up with the Olympus recording. That was something that I had to find out. So just that they don't get out of sync after, like the entire event is almost 2 hours long, or basically 1.5 hours, something like that. And I just didn't want them to go out of sync. The second thing was that I noticed that some regions, especially within the Olympus recording, were just hurting my ears. So what I decided to do was I put a 4-band EQ band split onto my Olympus recording. How this basically works is it's a JS plugin within Reaper, which you can plug onto your signal, and it will basically split the signal into 4 bands, which you can then grab and route into separate tracks, which you can then again apply effects to, control volume and all this kind of stuff. Let's look into this. It's basically a plugin which is called 4-band splitter. And there are multiple splitters available within Reaper. Basically, I think a 3-band splitter, a 4-band splitter, a 7-band splitter, I'm pretty sure. I'm not entirely sure if there are other splitters as well, but basically Reaper has a few of them. And what you can now do is, within the splitter, you configure thresholds like ranges. Always one less splitter than you have got bands, obviously. And these are the crossover frequency ranges where the bands are split. The first split occurs at 150 Hz, means that you got the first band, band 1, which has all the information below 150 Hz. The second split occurs at 500 in my case, which means that the second band has all the information between 150 and 500 Hz. And the third occurs at 5000, which means that the third band got all information between 500 and 5000 Hz, and the fourth band contains all the information above 5000. What you now need to do is you need to disable the send to the master, which is easily be done via the context menu, right? Just disable master send there. And after doing that, you have to control and add a send to the different bands basically that you want to have. Like the 4-band splitter would basically create out of the 2 stereo signals from the input signal, which basically generate 8. Like the first band goes to channel 1, 2, the second to 3, 4, third to 5, 6, and fourth to 7, 8. And you basically have to route those channels to separate tracks if you want to process them further on those tracks. And that's what I did. I basically have a track baseband, a track low band, a track mid band, and a track treble band. Let's listen to them real quick. Let's solo the baseband. There we go. Pretty nice and clean, right? I basically put this down to minus 30 decibels. I made it a lot more quiet than it was in the original signal because it was really boomy. And decided that I didn't want this to happen. I wanted to be understandable. I wanted to be supportive, and it definitely was not supportive. Let's solo the low band. As I can hear a lot more information, especially the applause is definitely audible, and I had to put this down to even less, to minus 45 dB, because this was the range that I found to be distracting. Let's check out the mid band. This is obviously the most important band here, and is the band that I put down to minus 15, so I put this a bit quieter to prevent clipping and all this kind of stuff, but it's the most important band, so it's the most active and the loudest band basically. And then we've got the treble band. Which I put down to minus 5, and I put a compressor on it. And that's the cool thing about band splitting without having to work with one reEQ instance or multiple reEQ instances of this on the same track. You can basically route those to separate tracks, and then you can apply different effects to the separate bands. And basically you can have different effects for the individual bands here. And I decided to put a compressor onto the treble band. You can also disable this and see if that makes a huge difference. And now again with compressor. And it does make a difference. It's definitely audible if you hit separately, like soloed, but if you have it in context, then you don't hear the difference too much. And it really does something. It's not as piercing anymore in the overall context. In my eyes, or to my ears, that is. So that's the second step that I did. I basically created those 4 bands. I decided on which bands are the most important ones. I basically leveled them correctly and mixed them correctly. I decided to change or turn down the low band because I noticed that it really hurt my ears. I decided to turn down the bass band because it was too boomy, because of the Olympus LS-14, which got a third microphone, which is dedicated especially to recording the low frequencies, and this was basically doing its job, but it was doing its job too hard this evening, so I decided to turn it down. And the last thing that I had to do, and I demonstrated this earlier as well, was that we've got huge clipping problem on the Olympus track. Just, you know, I've got a specific situation which was really loud. Let's jump there, disable the declip and solo this. And now, that's sort of what I mean. So what did I do? I put on the Isotope RX9 declip plugin onto this, and I basically just let it do its thing. I don't have much experience with tuning those and having them do a better job, basically. I just basically more or less kept it at default settings, and it's really doing a great job. Like, it's not perfect. Basically, whenever something clips, you're losing information. That's all the thing behind it. You basically lose a lot of information, especially information in the heights and all this kind of stuff. And what the clipping does, it tries to recalculate those information, but it cannot be perfect because you cannot recalculate a reverse scenario. So it's basically trying its best, and it basically comes up with this. Like, you can definitely hear that we are lacking of information. Like, the heights are definitely a problem. You can definitely hear that we did recreate information there, and we're still lacking information. But adding together with the Apple Watch recording, we basically get this. And it's not too bad anymore, right? Because we basically have the Apple Watch recording, which is doing this in the same situation. As you can see, thanks to the automatic leveling from the Apple Watch, it does not clip, and it contains all the information that got lost on the Olympus recording thanks to the clipping. So we can dial this in, and that's what we did, and we can basically rebuild a bit of information there. And it's still audible that we clipped there, and we had to do something about this, and it's definitely not a perfect recording. I gave this to friends of mine who really enjoyed the recording, the overall end result, and it's fine. I liked it, and I would definitely try and see if I can further improve on recordings like this. That's basically what I did. So step 1, I had to align them properly. Step 2, I split the Olympus recording into several bands. Step 3, I basically mixed the bands and put in a compressor onto the treble band. And step 4, I had to declip the Olympus overall. And because I put the declip onto the Olympus track before the band split, I basically have the declipping within all the bands that then go out to the separate tracks, which I then can mix properly. So that's pretty neat about the signal flow within Reaper. So this was a kind of experimental video, and I decided to do something that I usually don't do that much, but it was a nice experience. It was a fun experience. I gave it my best, and I found out that having an Apple Watch recording is absolutely not bad. I mean, it sounds great for an Apple Watch, like it can run hours and hours of recording. I didn't even lose 10% of my battery by doing this with an Apple Watch 7. And the recordings are great for what it is. And I basically could easily combine it with a re-recording that was lacking in certain parts, but it was also really rich in others. So combining both of them together really yielded a great result. Like, I really like this, and I hope that you could get something out of it. And now notice that combining two of those ways of recording things could really add up on each other, and you could definitely create something great out of it if you want to. So thanks for staying with me. Thanks for following along. And I hope that you enjoyed and got something out of it. Until next time, bye bye.